Today I'm over in Souci Estates here in Miami. This is only my second time that I've ever been over this way, and there's a lot of different streets along this chain of islands essentially, kind of like over in Miami Beach where we were the other day. So I'll be able to come over here several times and not even walk the same streets twice. And you got all these canals in between. It's a pretty nice little area over here. Lately I've just been enjoying going to new places that I haven't been to before, because I've lived in Miami for 15 years and it's just interesting to go different spots that you knew that were there, but you just never really seen them up close and personal like this. So this has just been really fun doing this with you guys. Now I have a ton of interesting information to share today regarding rent prices and how that relates to purchasing a home right now. I mean, obviously buy versus rent has been one of the biggest dilemmas that home buyers or potential renters have been facing since the dawn of time, right? Since you could buy a home, since you could rent a home, people have been debating this. For a lot of people, the decision is just made for them because the cost to buy is just too high and people are forced to rent in a lot of cases. Well, I was gonna go down this street, but the leaf blower guy showed up, so I'm turning around going down a different street. Now, one thing we know for sure is rent prices and the cost to buy a home has increased tremendously since all of the money printing took place a couple years ago. I bet you didn't know that the typical home price has increased 70% more than the typical rent throughout the United States. So one thing that is crystal clear is the cost to buy a home has shot up a lot faster than the cost to rent a home, which is good news for renters and people who are priced out of the market or are choosing to rent to wait out this housing downturn, because in many cases you can save a lot of money renting right now. In fact, it is cheaper to rent in 45 out of the 50 most populous US cities, and that's only based on what rent payments are versus the monthly house payment with principal and interest. This is not including any other expenses that are related to owning a house, and it's still cheaper to rent out of 45 out of 50 cities. So that should tell you something right there. Right now, the national average for monthly mortgage payments is about $174 more per month. That's just the average, guys. When you look at the more popular major cities throughout the country, it is on average $872 more per month for mortgage payments versus rent. So once you go into real popular areas, then the cost of ownership really starts increasing far beyond the cost to rent. And this is always readily visible when you look at very expensive markets like San Francisco, California, or Los Angeles, or New York City, places like that are very popular. Everyone wants to live there, but the cost to rent there is so much cheaper than it is to own. It's not even funny. In fact, I have the whole list here, and I will flash it up on the screen at some point where I'll scroll through it and you guys can see all these places where it just makes no sense to buy anything. But that doesn't mean that's the case everywhere. And that's the other thing to keep in mind, guys. These monthly calculations that we're going to be looking at only include mortgage payments for principal and interest payments. That's it, compared to the average rent in any given area. And still, it's cheaper to rent, because when you buy a house, there's more expenses than that, right? You also have your homeowner's insurance. There's your HOA fee if you have one. This place probably has one. This is probably an HOA. You also have maintenance costs and repairs. So the cost of ownership is probably far more than what we're actually talking about here in this video. I'm getting so used to seeing every house being a flip here in Miami, I was surprised that this one's not. In fact, they bought it back in 2013 for $1.3 million, and now they're listing it for sale for $3.9. It's been on the market since December of 2022, so I would imagine the listing agent's listing agreement is running out very soon. It's usually 6 months, and the property tax bill is coming in right around $34,000 per year. If you guys saw my video a couple days ago, we kind of went over a similar statistic from the Johns Byrne Real Estate Consulting firm, and they found in their study, as of 2022, that owning the average single-family home costs $839 more per month than renting one. And that's when you're factoring in all these additional expenses that come along with home ownership versus renting. But yet, so many people are clamoring to buy a home. Now, according to this study from HomeBase, which put together all these buy versus rent scenarios in the 50 most popular cities in the United States, they determined that mortgage interest rates would have to fall to 4% in order for this dynamic to shift, where 30 out of the 50 cities will now be actually cheaper to buy than to rent. Now this house, I don't know if it's for sale now or they just never took down the sign from January 2022 when it sold for $2.25 million. And look at this, you can actually see some of the mistakes that listing agents make sometimes. They actually listed it for $235,000 by mistake. I'm sure they got reamed for that one, had to take it down real quick and put up the real price, 2.3 back then. And the property tax bill is coming in at $29,000 per year. Now take a look at this chart, and I'm going to scroll through this for you guys slowly so you can take a look at the whole thing and look for your metro or city on here. But what this shows you is the average difference between the typical rent payment in a given city versus the typical mortgage payment with a 6.8% interest rate. The country's average is about $872 right now. So that's a huge difference of what it actually costs to rent versus buy. And having an $872 per month savings is significant if you ask me. Now the cities at the top of this list are the cities where it actually makes more sense to buy than to rent. But as you can see, that list is pretty short-lived because you only have to go down about 6 cities in until it starts getting more expensive to buy than to rent. However, you guys can see that Miami is number 9 on the list, which was one of the main reasons that I decided to buy instead of rent, because the cost is so close, and this chart just backs up what I've said about that in the past. But as you scroll down, the cities just become more and more expensive to buy in versus rent. And to me, everybody has to decide at what point are you willing to spend this much more to buy versus rent, because we're talking just payments here. The actual cost is going to be a lot higher, guys. So if you look at Dallas, Texas, for example, where it's $617 more per month, well, you could probably round that to $1,000 more per month when you're factoring in your cost for insurance and the maintenance on the house that you're not going to have to do in the rental. This only tells a fraction of the picture, but all you got to do is guesstimate that it's going to cost actually a lot more than what it's showing right here. Look at this. Got a prime empty lot right here on the water, ripe for development. I can't believe it doesn't have a for sale sign in front of it. Now when you're scrolling down even further on this list, you can see it just makes no sense whatsoever once you're starting to get into a lot of these western cities when it comes to buying. You're talking about Denver, Seattle, San Diego, Salt Lake City, Portland, Oregon, Sacramento, Austin, Texas, Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Jose. Look at the difference, guys, all the way at the bottom here. It's a whopping $6,200 more expensive per month to buy than it is to rent in the area, which is just staggering when you think about it. Now don't forget, if you're enjoying the video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the like button on the video. I'm giving you the reminders at your request. And one of my viewers, Justin, he made a comment in a video a couple days ago talking about how he's been able to save a lot of money renting, and he actually broke down a 30-year buy versus rent scenario, which is based on his parents' house. And he was kind enough to send me the Excel spreadsheet that shows all of this, and I want to share it with you guys because there's some interesting findings within this. Now, Justin's scenario is based on a $300,000 home in Houston, Texas, putting a $10,000 down payment, borrowing $290,000 at a 7% interest rate for a 30-year fixed mortgage. Now, when he factored in, as you can see here, the cost of property taxes over 30 years, as well as the cost of maintenance over 30 years, plus the average HOA payment, the total cost to own the house comes out to about $1,266,000 in change. This is really good information that Justin has here. But one thing I will say about this is the odds of somebody keeping a 7% interest rate throughout the entire 30-year loan is probably slim to none. and most people will refinance when rates come back down again. However, even though they will have a lower payment at that point, remember, when you refinance, the clock restarts back to zero, and now you have a new 30-year mortgage. So whether you're actually going to save money on interest in the end, I would say probably not that much. Depends on how soon you can refinance, but you are saving on a monthly payment then. And the other thing that I think Justin actually underestimated was the cost of maintenance on the home over 30 years. He used about 1% of the home's value as the annual maintenance cost of around $3,300 per year, but I think it can easily add up to a lot more than that, guys. I mean, anybody out there who's watching this who owns a house right now can probably easily back me up on this, that the expenses to own a home most of the time are going to be probably a lot more than that. Even just one air conditioning unit going out, the furnace going out, you know, a roof repair, anything like that can easily already cost more than this, and that's not even factoring in all the other additional expenses that might come up. So I think it's safe to say that the actual cost of ownership could be quite a bit higher than Justin's estimate here over the 30 years, okay? But just running with this scenario, let's take a look at the breakdown, which he calculated about 4% appreciation using his parents' home as a real-world example of how homes have appreciated over there in Houston, Texas, okay? And over the 30-year time frame from buying right now, it's estimated that the home would be worth about $973,000 in 30 years from now. He also calculated property taxes going up about 2.33% per year. That's how he came up with the cost of ownership of the average Houston house right now over 30 years. But here's the interesting thing. When you go and look at the rental side of the equation, looking at a 30-year rental spread in his apartment complex, they're not allowed to raise the rent more than 7% per year, which is awesome. I mean, that's pretty fair. Too bad it's not like that everywhere. At that rate, using the 7% increase per year, he went from paying $950 a month right now, okay, and in 30 years from now, you'd be paying roughly $6,758 a month renting, bringing your total cost to rent over 30 years to $1,076,852. Clearly, there's a big difference there between the cost to rent over 30 years versus buy. And that's just on a lower price home of about $300,000. And the median home price right now in the country is hovering still close to $400K. So that's more on the affordable side. And it's still cheaper to rent than it is to buy. Now, first of all, one thing I have to say is Justin gave this to me as an example to show people that not only that it's cheaper to rent over this time frame than it is to buy, but the whole purpose of this exercise really is to show that this is supposed to be still temporary, guys. The idea here is you're supposed to use this window of opportunity in time, which is right now, where rent prices are significantly lower than the cost to own, to save the extra money to eventually buy a home. And that's what Justin is doing. So it's not like he's saying, oh, I'm just going to rent for 30 years and forget about ever buying something. That would be foolish. But what he's doing is he's using that extra savings right now. He's only paying $1147 a month right now. And with that $1147 a month rental payment, he's able to save enough money where he's hoping to put a roughly 50% down payment on a house by next year. If he would have bought in 2020, for example, he only would have been able to put down $3,000 down payment, which is practically nothing when you're buying a house. Now, this is the scenario that Justin is using to justify renting right now versus jumping in and FOMOing into the market. And I think this is an excellent point, and his spreadsheet backs up the current trends that we just went over in the housing market, where basically everywhere it is cheaper to rent right now than it is to own something. And the other thing is, guys, one thing that you should 100% be doing if you make this decision to save the extra money in rent at the moment, waiting to buy a house, you need to be investing the difference, okay? So that's the other key aspect to this. If you're saving $800 a month by renting versus owning, you need to be doing something with that $800 a month in terms of investing. Most people will use the stock market, invest it there. I'm not even telling you where to invest it. I don't care where you invest it. Whatever you feel comfortable with your preferred method of investing. But the point is that you do invest it so that savings grows over the years and gives you the opportunity to buy when times get better. Because what his plan is really smart, I think. Because he's been able to save so much renting, now when it is time to buy, he's going to go for a 15-year mortgage, and he's only going to have a $1,300 or $1,400 a month house payment. And that's based on current prices, guys. That's not even including the fact that maybe home prices are going to come down. Okay, I think this is a very smart thing right now for people to be looking at. And thank you, Justin, for sending me this example that you put together. Nice job. Now, of course, I thought of this, and I'm sure people are going to be already typing in the comments, so hold your horses on this one. Well, Michael, you can sell the house after 30 years and recoup a lot of those expenses that you had renting. That is true. Now, if you were to do that and you sold the house for Justin's estimate, the $973,000, you would come out with roughly a $293,000 profit in the end after spending the $1.26 million to purchase and all the expenses related to the house after 30 years, selling for all the appreciation that you gained, and walking away with a $293,000 profit. Versus if you did actually rent the entire time, then you're not going to be coming up as good. Versus if you did decide to rent the entire time, the results will not be as beneficial. Because if you rented the whole 30 years, then the difference in savings comes out to $190,000. So you still would have saved money, so to speak, on just the cost basis alone. But when you factor in the sale of the property, that's when you're finally ahead, but only 30 years later. What this shows and proves is that owning a property is still better in the very long term financially, but only the very long term, guys. And like I said, the purpose of this exercise is to look at how renting in the short term, when it's less expensive than owning, can benefit you and propel you into home ownership in the future. That's exactly what I did. I had a very good rental deal for a lot of years, guys, and was able to save the money that I would have been spending on owning, okay? But instead, I was able to save that money, get a sizable enough down payment to where I could actually purchase something. Well, I guess the agents around here just like to keep the sign in the yard for free marketing, because this place sold all the way back in January for $2 million, and this is just a teardown. That's the crazy thing. This house is a waterfront lot. It was marketed as a teardown, so somebody paid $2 million just to get the land to build a brand new house on. And the previous owner, you can see the benefit of having that homestead exemption. They were paying $88.49 a year. But if you go back to when they didn't have the homestead exemption, it was $23,000 a year in property taxes. Now, the other thing, of course, that people have to take into consideration is this doesn't always just boil down to the numbers of what makes more financial sense. I mean, obviously, there's other things that push people into buying. It seems like, from what I can tell lately by a lot of the things that I've been reading about people that are stuck in their homes and wanting to sell, wishing they could move up to a better home, things like that, most of those people are driven by their family situation. They're planning on having more children and having a bigger family, so they need more space, or maybe they have older relatives like aging parents that need to move in with them. That changes their situation. That seems to be the number one reason why people need to buy in situations like this. And the other thing I want to mention about it too is very likely the rental scenario that Justin outlined in his scenario probably pertains to renting an apartment versus actually owning a $300,000 single family home. And of course, there's all sorts of quality of life differences there, but that does come down to preference. Some people don't mind living in an apartment and like the fact that everything is taken care of for them, while other people want the freedom and comfort of a single family home. This house was only listed for a couple months, and then they gave up for whatever reason. They were asking $2.65 million, and the realtor left the sign in the yard. And here's where having the homestead exemption really comes in handy, because they bought this house for $315,000 back in 1998, and they're paying $8,800 a year in property taxes, but that's only based on a $340,000 assessed value. Whoever buys this house brand new is going to be probably paying around the $25,000, $28,000 a year property tax bill like many of these other homes. Go and look at this chart that I put up. I'll have a link for it down in the description below, like I always do, to determine if you're looking in a place where it makes sense to buy right now versus rent, because you might be surprised at what you find. And the last thing I will leave you with is this. These are some of the top markets where the rental prices are declining right now, which makes it even cheaper to rent. Number one on the list, Austin, Texas, is down 14.3% year over year. Phoenix, Arizona, down 9.6% year over year. Las Vegas is down 7.1%. Oklahoma City, 6.4%. Chicago's down 6%. Birmingham, Alabama, down 4.5%. Memphis, Tennessee, down 3.6%. Dallas is down 2.8%. So if you live in any of those metros in particular, you really have to be weighing your options right now if it makes more sense to rent than buy, because odds are it probably does. But on the flip side, if you live in Providence, Rhode Island, rents are up 16%. Raleigh, North Carolina, it's up 12.4%. Indianapolis, it's up almost 11%. Charlotte, North Carolina, up 10.5%. Cleveland, Ohio, 9.7% up. Columbus, Ohio, 8.3% up. Kansas City, Missouri, up 8%. Milwaukee, Wisconsin, up 8%. Pittsburgh is up 7.9%. And Nashville is up 7%. These are cities where you can see that rents are on the increase still, and if it does keep increasing, then you might end up getting priced out of rentals in these cities, and it could make more sense to buy because then you're more locked in to the expense of the home. The overall trend right now in the country is that rents are starting to go flat, which is a huge relief for renters in general. In fact, rents only rose 0.3% year over year to about an average of $1,967 a month in April. So it's been slowing down for 11 straight months right now. And a large part of this is because there's a lot of new rental inventory out there, guys. The amount of new rental units that are hitting the market this year is in the neighborhood of 500,000 new rental units throughout all of the United States. So the rental inventory is skyrocketing compared to the inventory of homes for sale. So I think this is all great news for renters right now, especially people who are feeling discouraged by the market and feeling like they're forced to rent. Well, I would be taking a look at these things to find out maybe you're better off than you think you are right now. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you click the bell notification down below. YouTube will alert you every time I post a new video. And if you don't want to wait, check out my next one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.